This story happened a few years ago. I was in my early 20s and I was studying in Paris, France. I was going home from college. I usually took a short bus ride and walked the rest of the way. That day, I felt slightly uncomfortable. I could sense some guy looking intensely at me. I was used to unpleasant, unsolicited gazes, but this time, his gaze felt beastly. It's hard to explain why, but I felt like a prey being stalked. I decided to get off the bus a few stops early. I wanted to avoid him, and I didn't want him to see where I usually got off. Like I learned in the movies, I waited until someone else pressed the stop button and waited until the last moment to stand up and leave. I didn't notice him getting off the bus. Just as I was feeling the relief of having escaped an uncomfortable situation, I looked over my shoulder, and there he was, a few meters behind. I had the distressing feeling that his eye had just looked away the moment I turned. I walked into a shop, took out my phone, and pretended to be taking a call. When I couldn't see him anymore, I exited and made my way home as fast as I could. I kept looking back in the busy street. I zigzagged, crossing at every crossing. Finally, I believed that him getting off the same stop as me was just a coincidence. When I reached my building, I looked back one last time, and there he was, his alarming gaze on me, smirking. I ran up to my apartment, climbing the stairs 4 at a time. I reached the top floor, squeezed through my door, locked it, and froze. My intercom was ringing. Don't ask me why I picked it up. I regretted it the moment I did. I could hear the opposite flat intercom ringing as well. He had pressed all the buttons one by one, hoping someone would open. But now, he knew my name. Gabrielle? No shit. I felt like a deer in the headlights, frozen. Open the door, please, said a pleading voice. I just want to talk to you. Somehow, I just couldn't move or speak. Come to the window, he added. Look at me. You'll see, I am not a bad guy. Something clicked. He wanted to locate my apartment in the building. I was not going to make that mistake. I hung up in shock. I waited by the door without moving for what seemed like hours. When I finally managed to calm myself, I called my long-distance boyfriend. Call the police, he said immediately. Why didn't I call the police? I don't know. Today, it would be the first thing I would do. The fear of making a big deal out of something not important, perhaps. What an idiot I was. I called my best friend instead. I didn't want to feel alone. I told her all about it, and after a while, I felt better. Safe. We started laughing. Suddenly, the intercom rang again. 2 hours had passed since I had come home. I answered. Gabrielle, said the voice. Open, please. I still remember the chills I felt. He was still there. He was there after all this time. I was silent, petrified. He was silent, but I could sense his trepidation. Gabrielle, just let me in. I am so thirsty, he said. Just give me a glass of water. This broke the tension, and I hung up. I was curled up in a corner, literally in recovery position, terrified. I waited. I was scared to even make a sound. I knew he couldn't hear me from the hall, but I was scared to even breathe. The intercom rang again, and again. I didn't answer this time. I crouched over to the sofa and fell asleep in exhaustion. I heard the intercom ring one more time in the middle of the night. I woke up in the morning, afraid to leave my apartment. I called my dad, who came to pick me up. There was no one in the hall, but there was a note by my mailbox. Gabrielle, I am a nice guy. You should have opened for me. We immediately went to the nearest police station. The police listened and of course told me that I should not hesitate to call them. My dad called a locksmith to install digicode on our building door the same day and wrote a message to each of my neighbors asking not to open the door to anyone they didn't expect. He sat in the cafe in front of my building with 2 friends every evening for more than a week. I never saw the stalker again. After this episode, I used a different route to and from college every day. I kept my phone tightly in my hand and looked back every few meters. Today, I am still very observant of my surroundings. I never answer the door if I am not expecting someone. So people, if you ever find yourself in any kind of uncomfortable situation, call the police. Don't be an idiot like me. Be safe, everyone. When I was around 10 years old, my 18-year-old sister would babysit me when my parents were out. At the time, she smoked a lot, and my parents made her smoke outside, of course. So I'd follow her outside to the carport, which faced the street, and played around, annoyed her, and such. One day, my sister noticed a car at the end of the driveway, just sitting in the road. It was a white SUV, I believe a mid-90s Bravado, not sure, with a bike rack on top. It had the most tinted windows I had ever seen. You could not see the inside, even from the side. It sat there until she went inside, and then would drive to the end of the road and sit at the church parking lot and wait. Wait until she'd come out again for another smoke, and it would repeat this over and over. Odd, but my sister was a brave lady and just kind of ignored it. That is, until the next day when my parents were out again, and it showed up again. It would sit at the end of the driveway and just watch. I don't know what the driver was doing, but he was watching my sister. If I didn't go out, I'd watch from the front window, and it would just sit there and watch her. She told our dad, who was a sheriff deputy at the time, and he called the cops to make a complaint. They showed up, looked around, but the SUV was nowhere to be seen. Months went by, and nothing. Then one day, a good 9 months after this had all started, and about 4 since the last sighting, it was back. It became a regular occurrence. Another day, my sister was outside doing her nasty habit, and sure enough, here it comes. This time, we were alone as usual, and she decides she's had enough. She tells me to stay in the carport, that she's going to confront them. She starts walking towards the SUV, and halfway down the driveway, she would later tell us, I felt utter terror, like I knew if I went any further, I was dead. I was paralyzed by pure fear. She turned around and went inside. Finally, the family car was in the shop for some kind of issue, so we were all stuck at home for the night and had to get delivery, etc., while my parents were at home. My sister goes outside to smoke. I go outside with her, and eventually, the SUV shows up. She tells me to run inside and tell my father, and I do. My dad promptly gets his gun and starts briskly walking down the driveway with it in hand, in the direction of the SUV, but not leveled towards it. The SUV floored it, down the road, and peeled out onto the nearby large highway. My dad, being a cop, noted the year and model and distinguishing features. The scariest thing, the license plate had been covered up in duct tape. We never saw it again, and my sister just kinda shrugs it off now. When I was 16 years old, my best friend and I made the dumb decision to get matching tattoos from an older man who was doing tattoos illegally out of his home. He was well known in the area within our age group for giving cheap tattoos to minors. He had recently gotten out of prison for giving minors tattoos and not practicing under state guidelines. Needless to say, I don't know what we were thinking, but hey, when you're a rebellious 16-year-old, dumb as hell, and have a chance to get a tattoo for $20, I guess any and all common sense flies right out the window. So we set up a time with him to go over and get our tats. I don't remember the exact time we went over, but I remember it was already dark, so it must have been late evening. It was just the three of us, alone in his house. I remember feeling very eerie being there. Something about him and the energy of the place felt very off. But being the dumb teen I was, I chose to ignore those feelings and go through with it anyways. We were there for about 30 minutes, got our tattoos, and then left. Fast forward to a few months later, I see his picture and name on the news. At first, I thought he got busted again for his illegal tattooing. Little did I know it was so much worse than that. He had been arrested for one of the most heinous crimes someone could commit. It turns out, he had bought an old police car, a cop costume, handcuffs, and would go into parts of Portland that prostitutes frequented, impersonating a cop to arrest them. He brought them back to his house and chained up the victims in his garage where they wouldn't be heard. There, he repeatedly essayed and tortured them. I was absolutely sick to my stomach when I found out. I cannot imagine what those women went through, and I still don't really want to know all the details. This was all happening around the same time we were at his house, so the chances that one of his victims were there around the same time as we were could have been a possibility. I thank God that nothing happened to us, but there was also a part of me that feels guilt. What if someone was screaming for help while we were there and we just couldn't hear them? Why didn't he kidnap us? We would have been the perfect targets. And every time I look at the tattoo, it's a horrible reminder of what could have been, so I'm planning on getting it covered up. Thankfully, all of his victims are alive, and I hope and pray that they are all able to recover from this horrible act. He will be in prison for life with no possibility of parole. Always trust your gut. Hey everyone, thanks for watching tonight's video. And if you have a scary story or encounter that you'd like to share, you can email me at mrcrip2000@gmail.com. Remember to like and subscribe for more creepy content like this, and as always, good night.